Hey everyone, my name is Spray, and in this video, I'm just gonna go over a music video that I edited and color graded recently, and it was for my friend Joe. I'm just gonna go over through some like key stuff that I think is really important to note when you're editing and color grading a video. I think it's going to be more inclined towards color grading rather than editing, but just some things that I think can help anyone who wants to get better at this. So yeah, let's get into it. Like with every single project that you do, you're gonna run into a lot of issues, and you're gonna have to find solutions and workarounds for that. So this is gonna be a really great example of just to give you guys a context. This video was shot by Clayton King at Nam in an Airbnb for Joe, and it was around evening time, so sun was setting, and all that they had in the room was natural light. Unfortunately for Clayton, his ND filter just broke, from the side. So the pro mist effect, or the bloom or the softness in the highlights that you see was so amplified that the shots that were supposed to not have a lot of highlights also looked blown out and stuff. And yeah, I mean, there were a couple of shots that were shot to the bright side from the dark side and stuff like that. So the windows and stuff like that, that's where the light comes from, and that leads for you to have your subject underexposed a lot of the times. Some shots were incredible, like Clayton is amazing at what he does. However, due to the circumstances and stuff, some shots were not as optimal for there to be a lot of color information on the subject, that is Joe in this case. So I would just like to walk you through the project and just show you bits and pieces of my color grading stuff, even note trees and stuff like that. So yeah, let's get started. This footage second shot is also slowed down. However, for this second shot, I would just like to show you guys what I've done. So if I'm gonna press Alt D on my keyboard, it's gonna have zero color grade. So if you look at this, this is an S-Log video that Clayton sent over, and he was like, there's no you can go crazy and stuff like that, but since this song is called Denim Death, I just wanted to make sure that I'm serving the purpose of the song and stuff like that. I've made a subject mask on Joe using Magic Mask in DaVinci, and then I have pressed Alt O on my keyboard. So there's the primary mask and there's the rest of the footage, and I've just reduced the opacity and stuff like that. So without the mask, it looks something like this, and with the mask, well, it looks a lot better, right? But as you can see, let's check out my primaries and stuff. So okay, so I also denoised the footage a lot, because because of the promise stuff, there were a lot of artifacts that I could easily remove. So this one cool way to denoise is you could go and let's come to primaries. With primaries, I thought that, hey, maybe this is the best idea would be to just put the primary wheel before it goes into the CST, because there's literally no point putting a primary tab after CST if you're using S-Log, because the best part, in my opinion, about S-Log is that, hey, you have a lot of wiggle room with your highlights and shadows. Then maybe it's the best case scenario if you put it before the CST. So that's exactly what I did. The best way to get a filmic saturation is to never use the saturation over here. And the main reason behind that is that when you use this saturation, it saturates everything evenly. But if you look at saturation that you see in films, it saturates the highlights and the shadows differently. So you have to use HSV saturation. So what's HSV? HSV stands for hue, saturation, value. And what you have to do is you have to right click on a node, go to color space, select HSV, then go to channels, deselect 1 and 3. So what does that mean? Is that out of H, S, and V, you're deselecting hue and you're deselecting value. So you're only selecting saturation. That way, your entire color space is gonna get saturated and not just footage, if that makes sense. Okay, so for this shot, if you can see, let me just deselect all the masks. So this is how the shot looked like. As you can see, because of the unfortunate thing that happened with Clayton's ND filter, there's a lot of mist and bloom that's happening around this side of the frame, but there's not so much that's happening over this side of the frame, and this is also leading to a lot of noise in the footage. If you can see, like, this is without noise reduction and this is with the noise reduction. So as you can see, like, there's a lot of difference already. And then I just created masks. So I just went in here and I just created a mask, and what I did was I just bumped down certain stuff so that I could get rid of that, maybe essentially the highlights, because that's something that I did not want. So I could have the left and the right of the frame to be a lot more even. Third mask, what I did was I took this right side of the frame and I just made it look a lot more normal, because I felt like it was a tad bit on the overexposed side of things. And certain shots, this shot, this shot, this shot, even this shot for that matter, were incredible. I loved these shots. However, shots like these where there's a balcony in the background, those were the most difficult shots for me to color grade and edit and stuff like that. Primaries, yeah. You can see I'm doing, there's a lot of stuff that's happening on the primaries wheel tab, and essentially it's highlights. Honestly, it's just highlights. How much of a difference does this make? Just you can see it for yourself. It makes all the difference. I'm you even see it on the vectorscope. I'm preserving a lot of information from here. Okay, so this shot was done in post by Clayton. I edited the video, I sent it over to him, he put it through his CRT, and then he sent me this video. And what I assume is he turned the hue towards the teal, because I think this light is not teal but just white. And okay, so for a shot like this is probably the most difficult shot of the entire video, and there are a couple of reasons for that. Let me just do an Alt D to show you guys the S-Log footage of how it looked like initially. So you could see it was quite washed out and stuff like that. So I started off with denoise the footage, then essentially didn't have to do anything with the white balance, but with primaries. Okay, so let me just pull up the CST. So CST is just converting it from Sony S Gamma 3 Cine to Rec 709, Gamma 2.4, all that standard stuff. So this is how everything looks like. And as you can see, it's not the best looking footage, right? And there's a couple of reasons for it. Firstly, it's because it needs to be cranked up a little bit on the primaries, and that's what I'm doing over here. It's I'm reducing a lot, mid-tone information, and I'm because you can see primaries are bringing in a little bit more of the highlights, and then I'm doing the saturation, and as you can see, saturation is bringing in a lot of those blues back, a lot of those whites. Even his skin tone is better. Even the sofa, the blacks on the sofa are a lot more blue, and I just love that. And then there's this mask that's going on, right? Okay, so this was another shot that I think was difficult to handle because of a couple of things. Firstly, because of the fact that without the primaries, the shot was looking like this. The shot was this dark, and after primaries, it started to look a lot better. And just so as you can see, so on this mask, what I'm doing is I'm bringing down the gain a little bit, so making him look a little bit darker, and at the same time I'm also bringing down the gain on the mask. But you must be thinking that, hey dude, why didn't you just bring down the entire gain of the entire footage rather than separating this? So the key reason why you would separate the subject from the background, and you get more freedom that way. What if I didn't like Like some people would be like, hey, this is not too bad, but I know for a fact that this looks like it's masked. Like, you cannot fool me. So you could get away with that if you wanted to, but it just gives you more freedom and, like, just gives you more control if you separate the subject from the background and, like, did your color grading separately. Okay, so this is probably my favorite shot. This was my absolute favorite shot of the entire video. Like, I'm not even kidding, because there's just, like, from a compositional standpoint, like, there's just so much that, like, I can talk about that makes this shot great. So firstly, I think why this shot is great is, like, sun is coming at an angle. It's shot from the dark side. That's makes it instantly cinematic, because, like, when you look at all your favorite films, they shoot it from the dark side, and that's what makes a video look cinematic. And to me, this looks extremely cinematic because it's shot from the dark side. There's, like, a great amount of, like, sunlight coming into this frame, and you could see that on his guitar over here. You could see it, like, on his arm over here. You could see it a little bit of the soft light bouncing off on his fingers, and that just, like, enables for the entire shot to be a lot more sharper. And that's why you would see that you could, like, see the texture on his jacket a lot better. You could see, like, the deep, like, richness in his denim jacket a lot better in this shot. So I would just like to break down this shot, and let me just press Alt D to show you guys how it looked like in the S-Log format. I'm just gonna press Control D and enable the CST node. So this is how it looked like just by doing the CST, and it looks all right. If you look at it, it looks all right, but it's, like, feels a little bit desaturated to me. So before we go into the saturation part, I would just like to show you what I've done with the primaries. And turns out I did nothing with the primaries because I just loved how this shot looked. So I'm just gonna enable these three because, like, there's literally no denoising happening and stuff like that. So let's just instantly move to, like, the HSV stuff. And as you can see, the HSV stuff is making his skin look a lot more red. I would just, like, it's introducing a lot more greens. It's introducing a lot more blues back into the, because if I enable Dehancer, this is how it looks like on Dehancer. You could feel, like, maybe he's going pale. He's going a little bit pale, but with that saturation, you feel that effect coming back to life. Like, check this out. With all the Dehancer and all the post processing, this is how it looks like. Well, there's some good amount of, like, deep richness in, but if you look at his skin, dude, his skin looks like he's about to die of hypothermia and stuff like that. But just with the HSV saturation, man, instantly he's coming back to life. Like, chest compression, chest compression, chest compression. HSV stuff, let's see. Yeah, like I said before, like, use HSV saturation to bring life to your skin tones and, like, make sure that people can tell that, hey, this guy is not a vampire, because this looks really Twilight-ish, because there's no, like, way you can tell that, hey, there's blood flowing through his veins right now and stuff like that. But when you pull up that HSV stuff, you could, like, feel the redness in his skin, like, which denotes that, hey, okay, this guy has some blood flowing through his hands and stuff like that. Another cool thing for this show was, like, the promise stuff that was happening from the source. Like, that was making the left hand side of the image look a little bit more distorted, a little bit more noisy. So what I did was I just took a mask, standard mask. I just increased its, like, effect and, like, the area of, like, how far it should, like, spread. And then I just, like, cranked down maybe the gain, and it worked. No, it was not the gain, sorry. I just cranked down the highlights and it worked. And that's pretty much it for this shot, honestly. You can see, like, the difference between needed work. This shot was one of them. I think this shot looked really not that good. But then let me just track this real quick to show you guys. So so with just the mask, it looks something like this. But then what I did was I was like, hey, this looks way too obvious that, it's been masked and stuff like that. So I just took the background and I just reduced the gain on the background. And I think you could see it over here that I reduced the gain on the background a little bit. And that just made the shot look a lot better. And even though you could feel that, hey, there's some sort of highlights going on, but if I reduce it any further, it just wouldn't look good. So I was like, let the shot be this way. Primaries, let's see, there's nothing going on with the primaries. I think this shot had good balance. It's just that it was, yeah, the shot had good balance to begin with. So there wasn't a lot to do. Well, this shot, okay, so this was another great shot that I had to think about it a lot, because what happens is when you have a shot like this and when it goes to a place and a position where you have your highlights completely blown out, but cinematically, like, this is not, I mean, you would say that, dude, this is not good, this is blown out highlights. But if you look at film and if you look at old films, you'll see that when there's a lot of exposure going on in the background, sometimes it looks blown out, but it's just not as blown out, you feel me? And I personally took this as a more filmic, more artsy thing to do. It was like, you can look at it over here, I think it's because of the halation that it looks a lot better. So with the mask, I just had to mask the subject, and that's what I did. Every time you load a project, it's sometimes you might not get the good mask that you want, but I would just like to show you that without the Dehancer plugin, it looks decent, it looks normal, but with the Dehancer plugin, it looks more blown out. Then why the hell did I use a Dehancer plugin on this? Well, it's because it looks more filmic, it looks more cinematic, it makes Joe look like he is a god. Look at this. You're telling me that this doesn't look cool? Everything blown out and it's just him, just doing a breakdown. That's fucking cool as fuck. And I just thought that, hey, I should just add that in. Then we go on to the elephant in the room, that's halation. So what halation does is it takes your highlights and it makes them softer, essentially. And I think that people go overboard with halation a lot these days. So using a halation like this, I think this is an overkill in my opinion. I think for some videos it's cool, but I think it's like one of my icks now is that when people use no ramjet halation. So what does no ramjet mean? It's that people started to realize that when they had a film camera and light would bounce back from the sensor and outside. So what would happen is that if they had no ramjet layer, it would create massive amounts of halation, like the one you see on the film right now. But when you had a ramjet layer, it would suppress, it would add a limiter or a compressor for your halation. And that's what it does. It reduces your halation. I think people go overboard with that, and I don't personally like it, especially for video like this. I don't think this video was shot from a perspective of a film, especially given that it's switching between CRT and also some glitch effects. I think it's more modern and more technical. And given that he's also playing a Strandberg, I don't think going with a super old school film look was the vibe for this video anyway. And I think this is something that people have a hard time with, is that when they like something, they want to use it on everything without realizing the fact that maybe that's not something that they should do. One or two more shots maybe. I think this is one of those shots that I would like to go over through. So yeah, this is the blown out highlights. You mask the subject and you reduce the highlights, and you also take some information from the midtones. And for the background, what I did was the background looked a little bit more blown out, and I was like, this could have worked. This could have genuinely worked out, but I was like, nah, I would want to make it look a little bit better, honestly. So that's what I did. I was like, hey, maybe just take some stuff off from the highlights and maybe it will look better. And this is what I'm doing with the primaries. Without primaries, it looks a bit blown out. It's less contrasty and stuff like that. But I'm just adding a little bit of more, like, blacks into the in. You could see it on the retroscope. I'm adding a little bit more blacks, and I'm making sure that my highlights aren't, clipping. You could see, like, there's a lot more information with the RGB stuff, with the primaries enabled, and without the primaries, it's all squashed. It's all washed out and stuff like that. So that's something that I also had to do. Similarly with this video or this clip, same stuff, like, doing some stuff like with masking. And I think this is a really pretty shot. It's a really cool shot because, like, you could see that, hey, he's darker than the background, but at the same time I'm making the background look a little bit more in line with how I want the subject to look like. And at the same time, with the primaries, I'm bringing in back a lot more information on the shadows, and, like, the highlights are a little bit crushed, but you would see, like, it's not making that much of a difference. It's just making the image look a lot more better. I would say the key takeaway from this video would be to use HSV saturation to bring back blood and, like, make your subject look like a lot more natural with the skin tones and stuff like that. Also helps you get a lot more detail and more filmic saturation if you're using something like Dehancer or a LUT that has a Kodak 2382 print film and stuff like that. Another key thing would be to use your masks and use your waveforms and retroscope to see, like, how overexposed or underexposed your footage is. And lastly, I would say is that using halation tastefully, because I think people just use no ramjet halation thinking, hey, this is a cool thing, but you don't realize it makes your video look a lot more digital, because I can tell how a dehancer halation looks like, dude, and it looks more yellow, honestly. And like, the real halation doesn't look as yellow or red, but it looks more whitish, depending on how your stuff looks like from the source. But yeah, use halation tastefully and serve the purpose. This video had a lot more techno, a lot more glitchy and all that stuff. So, like, going an indie filmic route was probably not the best bet. So that's the reason why there's no grain. The video is looking a lot more sharper. So that's pretty much it for this video. Thanks so much, everyone, for watching. I hope you could take away some cool things from this video. And yeah, I'll see you guys later. Bye.